All right, here we go. Well, welcome again. So it's really my pleasure to introduce the moderator for the first panel of the Palestine Center, Dr. Abdelrazak Takriti. Fresh off the plane from the Netherlands, he looks very fresh. So Dr. Takriti is an associate professor and the inaugural holder of the Arab American Educational Foundation Chair in Modern Arab History at the University of Houston. He's the author of the award-winning book, Monsoon Revolution, Republicans, Sultans, and Empires in Oman, 1965 to 76. He is also the co-author and co-curator with Professor Carmen Abulsi of the Palestine Revolution website, Learn Palestine. So Dr. Takriti holds a Doctor of Philosophy from St. Anthony College, University of Oxford, and is a fellow of the Royal Historical Society. I must say, as somebody living in Texas, since Dr. Takriti came to Houston, he managed to energize the community, and we appreciate that. He is also a member of the Palestine Center Committee, and we're grateful for his contributions. Professor, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Eid Mustafa, for your wonderful and generous introduction. And it's a special pleasure to be here today, especially in the company of these very distinguished speakers that I have the pleasure of introducing. So we're going to start today with a discussion of the situation in Gaza. And I can't really think of anybody better than Dr. Munal Farra for sharing with us the horror that is unfolding there. Dr. Farra is a very distinguished physician. She's the director of the Gaza projects at the Middle East Children's Alliance. She's trained as a medical doctor and as a human rights and women's rights activist in practice. She's been working in the occupied Gaza Strip in occupied Palestine tirelessly for decades on issues of women's empowerment and human rights. She was born in Khan Yunis, Gaza, and has dedicated herself to developing community-based programs that aim to improve health quality and link health services with cultural and recreational services all over the Gaza Strip. Dr. Farra is also the health chair of the Palestinian Red Crescent Society of the Gaza Strip and a member of the Union of Health Work Committees. So we're really honored to be hosting her today. And Dr. Farra, the floor is yours. If you could please switch on your video, if it's possible. I know that in Gaza, there are many technical difficulties and the electricity and the internet do not always work, but. We need you to also switch on the audio, Dr. Farra, sorry. It's still on mute, Dr. Farra. Yeah, now it's better. No, still on mute, sorry. Dr. Muna, give us a second. I'm sure that Mohammed can look into it. We might need you to log off and log on again. That might be one way, but I don't know. Mohammed, do you have a technical solution for this?
Yes, it might be. Sorry, 1 second. I think it would be helpful to exit and then come back in. That might help. That could be helpful.
Yeah, and I think
okay.
Encourage everybody.
Sorry for the difficulties with that, but we will.
It happened, and yeah. I want to share with folks something, which is actually this situation might illustrate some of the difficulties that our sisters and brothers face in Gaza, with so many shortages, really terrible internet, the most basic services are unavailable there. So I'm hoping that it's just a glitch. And I think it's really worthwhile to wait for Dr. Farra. She's
Yes, yeah, I agree, of course. And again, yeah, it could be that there's a power issue as well. So we'll see. But as everyone knows, like Dr. Takriti said, the people of Gaza face all kinds of problems that we take for granted. So let's see if this worked now. Okay, Doctor, if you can please unmute now and see if we can hear you. Okay, still, let's see. We still can't hear you. Okay, so if everyone can please, if we can please just I'm gonna call Dr. Muna and see if I can help her out over the phone. Sorry for the technical problems, but we will take care of it and get back to you soon.
So perhaps we can then move on to Jerusalem and hear from our next distinguished speaker while you sort out this technical.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
That will give then Dr. Farra time to
okay.
address whatever issues.
Thank you, Doctor.
So on that note, I'm really also equally honored to be introducing Reem Hammad, who is an inclusive educator that works for an international organization, TDH Italy, that supports 12 Palestinian schools in Jerusalem and its surrounding districts. Now, she is a mother of 4 who was born and raised in the neighborhood of Sherzara, which, as we know, is currently facing a major settler colonial assault. And there's an attempt to undermine the Palestinian historic character of that neighborhood. So we're very pleased to be hosting you, Reem, and please go ahead.
Yes, hello everybody, how are you? Hope all are well. I'm very sorry. First of all, I want to apologize because I had to take my kids. So I'm so sorry. And I also would like to take the opportunity to thank you for, having such panels and having such, meetings and webinars to educate, the international community about different issues, that concern Palestine and Jerusalem and Gaza in specific. So as Dr. Takriti, can you hear me well?
We can hear you. Can you please switch on the video as well?
I'm sorry?
We can't see you. We can hear you, but we can't see you.
I'm actually driving. If you,
okay. It's fine.
But I will turn on my camera. I'm right.
That's fine.
Sorry.
No
okay. So, if I'm so sorry, but I had to take my kids because we had plans already.
And Reem, if you prefer to not switch on the camera because you're driving, that's
I'd prefer to turn it off. Okay, as Dr. Takriti said, my name is Reem Hammad, and I was born and raised in the neighborhood of Sherzara, who has been undergoing a lot of, settler colonization. And, ever since I was born, I've always been hearing about court cases and issues concerning our, forced displacement from our homes. This all started, I'm going to go ahead and give a brief history about the neighborhood itself and how it was, established. The neighborhood was built in 1956 by the United Nations, the UNRWA, and the Jordanians, where the Jordanians provided the land, and then the UNRWA funded the building of the 28 units that have around 500 people residing in them. We were promised to have those houses, registered in our names within the passing of 3 years of our resident, of us living in the units. That never happened because in 1967 the war happened and the Jordanians were out of Jerusalem, and the Israelis came and occupied Jerusalem. In 1971, we were shocked by having our first, case in courts from, the settlers had actually. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. The settler organization have fought us in court since 1971, and the reason for fighting us in court was that they're claiming that the land is theirs, so whatever is on the land is also theirs. So we have been fighting them in courts ever since then, 1971. And I'm sure all of you heard about Sherzara in the recent months and about the court cases that the 7 families have been having, and that we received eviction orders. Ever since May 2nd, we've been, going on demonstrations, and we've been peacefully trying to raise our voices and trying to let people know what's really going on the ground. We started the hashtag, and we started live streaming on Instagram and Facebook and on all other social platforms to raise our voices and to show the world what's really going on. And we really do not want to go through another displacement as our fathers and our grandfathers been through in 1948 and 67 and so on. So we started this whole thing, and we've always been peacefully demonstrating, but in return we get the soldiers and the settlers also attack us with different means of violence. They would throw spray gas, throw gas bombs at us. They would even at times they were shooting bullets, rubber bullets, skunk water, which is really harsh chemical water, and it smells horrible. Many things were used to scatter the demonstrators, the peaceful demonstrators. And we actually also had the neighborhood closed from all 4 entrances, and only people with the address Sherzara on their IDs were allowed to enter. Even when we had the Eid is our holiday after the month of Ramadan, our relatives were not allowed to come in. And if they were nice enough, the soldiers were nice, they would let them in, but they would give them a time frame, like half an hour or an hour as a max, to come in and visit with us, and then they have to leave. So we've been under a lot of stress, under a lot of pressure, but even with all that's been happening and all that has been going on, because we know that we have the right to own, the right to our homes, and we own our homes, we are not going to give up, and we will stay steadfast, and we will not allow anyone to come and take over our land and our homes. These are the homes that we were born in, we were raised in. We have so many memories in each and every corner of the house and each and every corner of the neighborhood itself. So we will never give up. And recently, as you might have all heard about the court proposal for us to pay rent for the organization, the settlers organization, Nahalat Shim'oun. And for us to be considered, protected tenants, and definitely we refused that proposal. And in turn, we are now waiting for the court's orders on whether, we don't know what to anticipate. They might order forcible eviction, or they might postpone their ruling. We really are not sure of what's going to happen now. So that's what's happening in Sherzara, in very briefly. If I hope it was beneficial, and if you have any questions, I'm sure you're going to have time for people to ask questions at the end, towards the end. But if you have anything else you would like me to add before the audience ask any question, I'm more than happy to do that.
Fantastic, Reem. And Reem, can you please tell us who are these settler colonists that are being brought into the neighborhood? Obviously, the objective is to change a neighborhood that has a Palestinian character at the moment, and
yes,
to turn it
definitely,
to a Jewish neighborhood.
Yes, exactly.
By necessity requires ethnically cleansing the families
Yes,
in the neighborhood
exactly,
and replacing them with other types of families. So
definitely.
where do those other families come from? What are they after? How do they treat the local population?
Yes. All of the settlers that come actually the house that has been taken, there are 4 houses that has been already taken and stolen from our neighbors, one of which was has multiple families living in it. And those families, the settler families that come, they come from all over Europe. They come from God knows where. We really don't know. And they, to be honest with you, they have no connection with the land whatsoever. But they all come and they're all armed. They all have weapons on them. They have guard dogs that they use to threaten and to scare the little kids that are playing in the streets. They curse at us. They do, hand gestures, bad hand gestures and finger gestures and stuff like that. And they bother us all the time. And it is worth saying that in the neighborhood, there's also a synagogue that, the settlers come and pray, and they claim that there's a tomb for one of their, religious rabbis or whatever. So they come and they have their, religious occasions there, and they have really loud music, and they stay, screaming and yelling and doing their prayers in very loud voices till 2 and 3 a.m. in the morning, and nobody says anything to them. But if we were to sit down and sing and demonstrate, using songs and things like that peacefully, we get attacked. So that's what we're facing. We live amongst settlers who have the power over even the soldiers. They order the soldiers on what to do to the Arabs and the Palestinians that are living in the neighborhood. So our life is tough. Kids are always scared to go out and play in the neighborhood, even though it's the only place for them to have their only recreation. I can't say it. We don't have a lot of parks and a lot of playgrounds around, so the street is the only place where they can play. So they're always afraid to do that, because once or twice they went out, they played, and they got attacked. My niece was actually arrested while she was coming back from school, because one of the settlers claimed that she threatened them, and she actually tried to hit one of the elders of the settlers, which was not true. So the soldiers came, attacked her, and shoved her into their police car and took her and investigated, her for about 6 hours. That's the situation we live in. That's our everyday routine. That's our everyday life. We can't live peacefully with all of this.
So
So
it's
yes,
not Reem that.
I'm sorry, I might have expanded.
No, and I
Go
think we'll have a chance to talk more about this. And I really, if it were up to me, actually, we'd want to hear way more from you, because I think what we sometimes do not hear about in the United States is this daily experience of stress, of bullying, of harassment. And that's the meaning
Yes.
of that in people's lives is something that we really cannot even grapple with. We're so far away from
Yes.
reality. But it
Yes.
sounds like it's hell on earth. You're
It
surrounded
is.
by a very hostile environment.
Yes.
And obviously, these folks are coming in to intimidate you and to drive you out. So they're trying to do
Exactly. And
everything possible to
it's
drive
also worth noting that يعني the families that live in the houses, they rotate them. They're rotated. It's not one family that comes and stays there for, whatever years, however many years. No, they rotate them year by year or even month by month, so that they won't, I don't know exactly the reason behind that, but um, the families are rotated on like a regular basis, and they're actually being paid to live in our homes and to make our lives hell.
that is unbelievable. And honestly, the tragedy that is unfolding uh, is something that needs to be shared with the world. And we really appreciate the fact that you're sharing it. I
Yes.
dare say that watching the people of Sherzara resist in the face of the might of the state and all the international powers that facilitate its apartheid and ethnic cleansing program in Jerusalem and elsewhere. It was very inspiring to see ordinary people resist
Yes.
that and
Definitely.
do it so strongly. And I'm sure we'll have many questions from the audience
Sure.
to you, Reem, in a second.
Mhm.
But for now, we're going to move on to another very horrific zone, which is that of Gaza. And I think we've resolved the technical issues with Dr. Farra. I've already introduced her, so you know already how inspiring she is, and we look forward to hearing from her. Hopefully,
Yeah.
it's work this time. Hello, Dr. Farra.
Yes. Hello, Salam. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Yes. Salam, yeah. First, I am very honored to be part of your annual conference and to meet with Reem and the other honorable people. But thinking of Reem and Jerusalem made me think of what is apartheid. What is apartheid in Palestine? Just now, I thought, what's happening between Gaza and the West Bank? Apartheid is separation. Apartheid is security, and we are facing separation between Gaza and the West Bank. I cannot meet with the Reem while it is only 1 hour and a half away from my hometown, Gaza. So this is very heartbreaking for me, but for us in Gaza, because we are living between one crisis and another, and in not only in Gaza, in Palestine, in the occupied Palestine, the whole 1948 Palestine, we are on the path of struggle. So maybe I don't have the luxury of saying heartbreaking, because there's no place for heartbreaking while we are on the path of struggle. This is just quickly. And just I'd like, before I go into the situation in Gaza, I wanted to share some of my reflections. And when people say Israel is apartheid, colonial, racist state, this is not the end of the sentence. This is ring a bill or many bills that condemns the Western governments, the Western governments, because present is linked to history, to past and history, And the history of America and Britain and other Western countries is so immersed in the blood of the different nations in Africa and Asia, everywhere, and even inside America with the peoples and the history of slavery. So the imperialist history in the colonies that led us later to the apartheid regime is in South Africa. While it has ended now via the struggle of brave African people and the huge international solidarity movement. It is part of history now, but it took another version, which is happening now live in Palestine. And I mentioned about the separation between us and the West Bank and Palestine 1948. So we are really living under apartheid, racist, colonial version of the occupation. So the history is again linked to the present, and we are struggling either in the West Bank, Gaza, or Palestine 1948, or Palestinian in the diaspora, because we are all one unity. I'm not no different from the West Bank or 1948. We are all going through the continuous trials of ethnic cleansing of Palestine. What happened in 1948 is happening today in the Sherzara. Can you hear me, by the way? Can
Yes.
you hear me? Yeah, it's
Very
happening
well.
in the Sherzara. So this was my introduction and my internal feelings. I'd like to share it with you. But if you want to talk about a practical situation in Gaza, and all of you have heard, have read about Gaza and what's going in Gaza. Just I want to say one sentence before I start. The world and the media hear about us in Gaza when it is big bang, when it is a huge assault against Gaza and there is bloodshed. They hear about us and they start mentioning Gaza, and Gaza is back to the media platform. But actually, every day I live in Gaza. I travel sometimes to see my children in the UK, but I am based and I live in Gaza. And every day I could hear the gunboats, the Israeli gunboats, shooting against the fishermen while I am walking by the sea. This is a daily practice by the Israeli occupation army against the fishermen. The fishermen in Gaza and their families are number like 36,000 people with their families, and they are sector of the poorest in our community. They are still subjected to those attacks. Many are injured, killed, and nobody hear about this daily practice. This is in the west of Gaza, the east part of Gaza, and the north part of Gaza, which is Gaza is, I didn't like to go into mentioning what is Gaza like, because I'm sure even the audience, but if they want to ask later, I can go into details. The east of Gaza now is the farming areas, the very small, this very small strip of land that is very impoverished and lack the accessibility to its natural resources like fishing and agriculture. The farmers are subjected to the same attacks every day while trying to reach their land by the borders. They are attacked by the army, and this is just something happening every day. The occupation approach the trees, shoot at the farmers who are trying to start again planting their crops, etc., or olive trees. And by the way, I'm saying that and being very aware and proud of that we are very steadfast and very resilient in Gaza. Despite this, and despite the daily hardships in Gaza, and the list is very long to continue mentioning it. But from my position at the moment as Gaza, Mecca project director in Gaza and dealing with children and theirs and health and other issues, I could say that after the latest escalation, what happened in last May in Gaza, there are, just let me check the number, but it is, I don't need to check it. It is at least 670,000 children in Gaza. By the way, Gaza population is 2.5. Half of them are children under 16. So half of those 670,000 of those children immediately needed, and they are still in need for psychological support and intervention on different levels, because Rome that affected them last May. And that's why, for example, we as Mecca, part of our intervention is this very big psychological support program for the children who were subjected to trauma. And we are doing this with the specialized organizations and with the community, because this is a great need. And when I, for the Gaza children, but when I say psychological effect on the children, the other side of it is also violence inside the schools after these children return back to their classes is very high at the moment. The violence inside the schools and the domestic violence as well. And all this is linked to the situation of Gaza people. We are living in very small piece of land. We don't have the freedom of movement outside Gaza, because Gaza has four or five exits. One is the Israeli at the north part, which is called Bet Hanun or Air. The other one is the Egyptian, and others, the rest, the three other are for commercial movement. And I'll come back to commercial movement as well, because one subject lead to another subject. So those kids are in need either for rehabilitation at the schools or psychological support outside, inside and outside the schools. And of course, the psychological well-being of the children affected their school performance, very obvious. And even the children who are has not been subject to the latest attack, those children who are living by the borders in the eastern part of Gaza, I mentioned earlier on that there are daily shooting against their families. So they are unable to, those specific children living by the borders, they are unable to focus in the school. They are very violent as well, and many other things. And they came from very poor of the poorest again families. And this is our area of intervention. We are targeting children on the borders as well, beside other areas. Let me talk about the destroyment that affected Gaza in the last May. Hundreds of buildings have been damaged, including schools, hospitals, medical facilities, etc. And they are still damaged up till now. Nothing happened in rebuilding of Gaza. This is one thing I want to leave aside, and I'd like to move to the nutrition. I'm sure you have all heard about the poverty in Gaza. The poverty, we are not hungry to the level that it is a famine. It is not a famine. They want us to keep alive, but it is not quality of life. It is quantity. People are eating, but they are on the way losing other things, like children. When the children are losing the accessibility to good balanced food, immediately they suffer of iron deficiency anemia, wasting, stunt growth, and other symptoms. And this represents about 45 to 50% of the children of Gaza at the moment are suffering of anemia due lack of proper nourishing, healthy meals. So that we are alive, but not healthy. Not healthy in the sense maybe one family in Gaza, like 6 to 8 members of the family, can afford one chicken every month, and the vegetables and the fruits the same. So this, again, it is not breaking my heart. It gives us the courage to continue helping people, and that's why our second intervention is the nutrition. A nutrition program that we are implementing in different parts of Gaza, and it's going to be continuous program. It is not just one-off project, because we are following up the children during their growth and their schools, and following their needs as well. This is apartheid, because our children are different to their children. Our children, when I say 67 children were killed in the latest attack in Gaza, and like 600, nearly 600 were injured, while two Israeli children were killed. I feel very sorry for the killing of one single child in the world. It's not only the numbers, but when you compare the numbers, it means that we are second class. We are subhumans. And this is the right definition of racism and apartheid. Our children's life doesn't matter as long as they are happy there, while they don't appreciate and understand that to have peace based on justice in Palestine, in whole Palestine, it means that our children should be happy and fulfilled to guarantee the peace and fulfillment for the other children. And this is of course, my long goal, in my life, that to see all the children of the world happy, satisfied, and their needs are well met. When I talk about the situation in Gaza now, I am speaking or addressing your respected conference while I am afraid that the internet will stop in 1 minute. The electricity might stop as well. So I am tense. I am tense in the sense of I want to continue my message, but the situation doesn't help. So I want to move to another point. Health in Gaza, and health in Gaza is again big issue. They tell the whole world that we allow medicine to enter Gaza. Yes, they allow medicine to enter Gaza, but the procedures for us as non-governmental health organizations or hospitals, it takes a long time to reach us when it is needed because of the procedures. This is number one, the medicine. But I'll talk about other things, not only the medicine. The goods, there is great restriction at the moment in the goods. That is bilateral use, you call it, that could be used for eating or for other purposes. Many items are missed in the market. Important items like cement, baby formula, some medicine. Of course, I mentioned medicine, but again, there are not only the medicine. Suppose in a hospital or medical facility, MRI was broken down, needs spare parts. It may take 1 year for the MRI or the CT to be repaired, and so the medical facilities and hospitals, including the Union of Healthcare Committee and Al-Awda Hospital, Red Crescent, we are working, struggling every day to make sure that the organization will continue work and we continue rendering our services, because we are living under abnormal situation. How many minutes do I have left? Please.
Dr. Farra, please continue. We can give you 5 more minutes.
Okay, so this is biggest challenge for us. We continue tirelessly, but sometimes we are tired, we are strained. We need people tired, people are strained because poverty is prevalent at the moment. 35% of families, we call them families of object poverty. I hope it is right. Object poverty, very poor families, like 40% of the Gaza population, very poor, that they depend on the social security or social grants from the government, social grant from the government. Now for 6 months they are not paid, these families, because the European Union again stopped this grant for Gaza, for those people who has no means in life. They are very poor, no means, except this very little amount of money that they take every month. For 6 months these families have nothing. Beside the other families that they don't have they don't have food security, so they can eat today, fast tomorrow. This is not the end of the story. Electricity is a big problem for us. Water, like we could say, like 50% of Gaza population don't have accessibility to proper clean water, suitable water for drinking. And this is intervention for us as Mecca to provide communities, schools, in UNRWA schools and kindergarten with water. Many things are lacking in Gaza, and people, but something did not end in Gaza: the social solidarity, the people who are supporting each other, even with the very minimal means and resources, and from the hands of the poor to the hands of the other poor, they are sharing. But the burden is high for countries, for big governments to deal with, and we are continuing trying to do our best. And I would like to share with you something that's very hard for me to talk about now, because I don't want to. Okay, I can mention later in the end of my presentation. I would like to talk about the cancer patients in Gaza. In Gaza, we don't have radiotherapy for cancer patients. In Gaza, we don't have a proper chemotherapy, we don't have protocols, and we don't have medicine. We don't have the chemotherapy itself. How can the doctors go ahead with the protocol treating cancer while we don't have the medicine itself? So our patients need to be transferred to the West Bank hospitals, and the word transfer is easily said, but it is difficult when you think of a family with a child, for example, with cancer. They have to go the journey several times, journey from home, whatever, maybe it is in Rafah, 40 kilometers away from Gaza, very poor family. They could not afford the transportation. They could not afford the proper food. They are going to the offices to apply for a permit. They go 1 time, 3 times, 4 times. Their permit by the Israeli COGAT, it's called the Coordination Office for Permits. Their permit is denied, and I got a number here from COGAT itself that 100 and no, okay, 116 permits were applied to the COGAT in 1 month, let's say 1 month, and 60% were rejected, denied permit to leave Gaza for a cancer patient, child or an adult, to the West Bank for treatment. 40%, for example, children, 40% of the children, they were guaranteed, the permit was issued, but the child was not, the parents' permit was rejected and was accompanied in with a stranger, or he was not accompanied with anybody. He went to the hospital to receive his treatment. I'll give an example here of Aisha Lulu, age 5, from Gaza city. At the year of 2019, she traveled alone to the Al-Muttala hospital. She was accompanied with nobody, and she stayed 1 year there, got her treatment, and returned back. Of course, luckily, not luckily, no, it's not luck. It is solidarity between Palestinian people themselves. People from Jerusalem, they are very happy, and they took strong solidarity stand with those children. Families take care of those children in the hospital, families from the community, from the Jerusalem community. But the child returned to Gaza and she died later, after 1 year later. Compared to another child who passed away 2 days ago. He is my nephew. He passed away. He's not in Gaza, he's abroad. He suffered with the cancer, of course, suffered with the cancer. Cancer is a monster for anybody, especially children. He got the right care of his parents, and he is not living under the occupation, but Aisha is living under the occupation. And this is no such a obvious or strong definition of apartheid than the story of a child going to a hospital, was denied the permit for his parents, and stay on a hospital bed alone 5 years, 4 years old. This is apartheid. No reason, no security reason for that. It is just, we are the occupier, we are the strong, we are the superior. It is the apartheid. And again, in the story, in the process of the journey, suppose parents were allowed to get a permit. They were asked to go for to have a meeting or integration. I don't know how to pronounce it, with the Israeli intelligence. It is very humiliating. That meeting is very humiliating. They have this interview at the borders while going for treatment, and many came back with the stories they are trying to convince them to collaborate with the army. So this is sort of the stories. I don't know if I've covered everything. Just give me 1 minute, because
Well, Dr. Farra, this was a very powerful testimony. And I think, again, when we hear of something like the siege of Gaza, for example,
yeah.
It might sound like an abstract concept. People might understand that this is something not good. Being under siege is not fun. But I think what you've conveyed to us today is, what does it mean to live under this reality? All of this suffering does not have to be there. All of it is manufactured, imposed, and it's done so as to punish the people of Gaza. And it's done so as to disrupt the social reproduction of Palestinian society. It's done so as to further and entrench this colonial system and its objectives, which are, at the end of the day, either the complete eradication of the native, which is happening in many parts of Palestine through expulsion, or containment of the native and their imprisonment in these different cantons, in which every aspect of their life is controlled. I think you've described to us very powerfully what this control means. It means that even cancer medication cannot make it to hospitals. Even parents are not allowed to sit with their sick children. Diet is controlled, calories are counted. This is horrific, and we're really proud to have given you this space to share with us some of these stories. But I know that no matter how much time we give you, it's not going to be enough, because what you see every day is horrific, as somebody who is very active in dealing and confronting this reality. So thank you, and we're inspired by your courage. We have multiple questions for you, and we're going to take them in a bit after we hear from Dr. Sami Ershied, who is joining us from Jerusalem. Dr. Sami, by the way, and you seem to spell your name in two different ways. Here in Zoom, Dr. Sami Ershied, whereas in the bio, it's Dr. Sami Ershied. So, but we're very proud to be hosting you. Yes. Which one is the correct one, Dr. Sami?
The correct one is Ershied.
That's what
I'm not responsible for the bio. That
was our fault.
Yeah. Well, that's what I suspected, because I'm very familiar, of course, with your family name, Dr. Sami.
Yeah, it starts with E or Alif in Arabic, but even we don't pronounce it. Sami Ershied.
Of course. And Dr. Sami is the lawyer of 4 Palestinian families who are facing forced eviction in Sherzara. Now, we've heard from Reem Hammad about the everyday life of these families, but we're very honored to be hosting one of the people that is defending them. So, Dr. Ershied, please share with us your insights on what is going on now in Palestine under this colonial and apartheid reality.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abdel Razak. I would like to start with a few comments. First of all, to thank the Jerusalem Fund for also sharing with us this platform in order to bring the stories and testimonies from Jerusalem and other places in Palestine to the whole world. It's very important, especially at these crucial moments and crucial days that we live in Jerusalem and in the area in general. I would like to thank the other panelists, of course, in the panel, and it's very difficult for me to continue after hearing the testimonies of Dr. Munal Farra and these heartbreaking stories from Gaza. However, in Jerusalem and in other places, also we have similar cases, but I'm glad that I'm not going to talk about death of children and the suffering of the last moments of these families sharing with their children before they pass away. However, I'm going, yes, to touch one of the core issues in the conflict in Jerusalem that is in the eye of the storm in the last few months, but we are in the eye of the storm in the last at least 85 years, and in East Jerusalem in the last 60 years. So I would like to, if it's possible, to share a PowerPoint. Can you, Mohammed, allow me to share from?
Yes, you should
computer?
be able to.
No. Okay. So as Dr. Abdel Razak mentioned, I wanted to correct another thing, not just the spelling of my name. I am one of 2 lawyers that we are the legal team representing the community of Karmit Jaouni in Sheikh Jarrah. It's a community of 27 Palestinian core families living in this area. And we are currently representing 13 families in Israeli courts in the last 25 years. 4 of these families have one of the cases in the High Court, in the Israeli High Court, and other 3 families that Reem Hammad, one of them, her family is one of them, also have another case in the High Court, and we have another 6 different cases still in the Magistrate Court of Families facing eviction proceedings from Sheikh Jarrah. The story of Sheikh Jarrah, it has many angles. The legal angle maybe in the centrum, because it's the most active angle, because this is the corner we were forced to fight at. I would like just to let the audience know what we are talking about and why we reached this corner of legal proceedings and legal actions against families in Sheikh Jarrah, Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah. But in general, I wanted to make a general comment that the case of Sheikh Jarrah reflects in many aspects the main and the core issues of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Here we see at the beginning of my presentation, this is the late Mrs. Rifka Al-Kurd. She passed away 4 years ago when she was in the age of 101. She passed the 100 years. She was born in, Mrs. Rifka Al-Kurd was born in Nazareth, in the Galilee, and when she got married in the 30s of the last century, she moved with her husband to Haifa. They lived in Haifa until 1948, and they were deported from Haifa together with their children during the 1948 war, and they became refugees in East Jerusalem. And then their struggle for a second house and second home started. It started immediately after 1948. I will go back to this. I just wanted also to let the audience know that just part of the legal and humanitarian legal issues that we face and we practice in daily basis in Jerusalem, they include house demolitions, forced evictions, restrictive zoning and planning policies, confiscation of land, settlement establishments, settler violence that you heard the testimony of Reem Hammad previously before Dr. Farra gave her testimony, construction and route of the wall, the separating wall that separated the parts, huge parts of the West Bank from the other parts of Palestine, and also separated some parts of East Jerusalem from the other parts of East Jerusalem, limitation of access to land, and restriction of movement. Of course, all this together with residency rights that in general, as a Palestinian in East Jerusalem, you are all the time on a temporary residency situation, and you have to continue to keep your living in East Jerusalem in order to keep your residency status. Otherwise, you lose it, because Palestinians in East Jerusalem, they are not citizens of Israel, and if they move outside to live outside Jerusalem, they are under the risk to leave their residency status, and then they cannot come back even to their homes inside East Jerusalem. These are parts of the cases. And when we talk about Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem, we talk about the occupied East Jerusalem that Israel annexed to Israel proper in 1967 after the 6 Days War. This was contrary to international law. This is contrary to more than 100 resolutions of the United Nations organization since 1967 until today. But we as Jerusalemites and in the ground in Jerusalem, Israel has imposed and it practices its full administration and full domestic law that also in many parts of it, as we will see later today, also was specially designated in order to seize East Jerusalem and to control the residents of East Jerusalem and to control to get full control of the land in East Jerusalem, and also to reorganize the property rights according to the Israeli policy as it is seen by the Israelis should be applied in East Jerusalem. And this area in Sheikh Jarrah, it's in the heart of East Jerusalem, in the heart of Jerusalem actually. And when we talk about the community of Sheikh Jarrah, the community of Karm al-Jaouni, the original 28 Palestinian families, going back to 1948, as I mentioned, all the families, they are Palestinian refugees that they fled their homes from historic Palestine, which became Israel proper. For example, the family of Reem Hammad, who spoke for me, if she mentioned they came from Haifa, as I mentioned also, Al-Qurt family came from Haifa. Some families came from Jaffa and Jaffa district. We have families also that they moved from, or they were forced to move from West Jerusalem to East Jerusalem. They lost their property, they lost their homes, their original homes in historic Palestine, and they became Palestinian refugees. And in this regard, when they became refugees, these families, they did not arrive to a refugee camp in outside Palestine or in the other parts of the West Bank. For some years, they were guests at homes of relatives or friends in East Jerusalem when East Jerusalem was put under the Jordanian custody after the ceasefire in 1948 between the Arab forces and the Jewish forces in Palestine. And for some reason, some organizations or some people thought at the beginning of the 1950s that it might be proper to think about a pilot project to make proper housing for Palestine, some of the Palestinian refugees who became to be guest refugees at the homes of their relatives or friends in East Jerusalem. And the idea was to grant these refugees proper housing, and in return, they gave back to the UNRWA their ration cards. So the project of Karm al-Jaouni in Sheikh Jarrah is a very unique project because the land was empty land during the beginning of the 1950s. And the government of Jordan had declared that it owns the land and this land is a public property and it can exercise any power over it. So the Jordanian government engaged in agreement with the UNRWA. According to this agreement, the UNRWA had paid to the Jordanian government few hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to construct 28 housing units on this land. And the Ministry of Construction, the Jordanian Ministry of Housing and Construction, had used the money that was granted to it by the UNRWA in order to construct 28 housing units, new housing units. And after that, both parties have published a bid calling for Palestinian refugees to come and apply and maybe get entitled to get each family one housing unit with a yard in this neighborhood. 28 lucky Palestinian families, they were picked among 100 of Palestinian families that applied for housing in this unit. And they were chosen in order to get these homes. Every family that was picked and they were lucky enough in order to get this housing unit had in return done two things. The first one, that they gave back their ration card to the UNRWA, and since that day in 1956 they were not entitled to receive from the UNRWA the services of free education, health insurance, and a monthly stipend that the UNRWA gave to Palestinian refugee families. So they paid from their side a full consideration for the houses. And the second thing that they did, they signed an agreement with the Jordanian government, with the Ministry of Housing, the Jordanian Ministry of Housing, that the ministry gave them full position for the housing units, for each family, one housing unit, as I mentioned, full position. And according to this agreement, they agreed to be under a period of experience for 3 years to be treated as tenants, but they didn't pay tenancy, they didn't pay rent, they just paid half a dinar for a year for a cleaning of the public areas, etc. And in the agreement, there is an article stating that after 3 years, the full ownership shall be shifted to the families. So since 1959, the families felt themselves that they became be full owners of the houses. They also exercised their ownership in these houses. Some of them had extended their housing units because the family had expanded, etc. Some of them even made a sub-rent and for the houses for certain periods, and they continued to live and treat the houses as if they were their full property, and also they are the landlords, of course, waiting for the settlement or the final settlement of the issue of Palestinian refugees that they hoped to come. Instead of that, in 1967, when the war occurred, as we remember in the 6 Days War, Israel had occupied the West Bank, amongst other areas of Palestine, the Gaza Strip, and also the Golan Heights from Syria and the Sinai Desert from Egypt. But especially in Jerusalem, Israel had made a very significant and very important things that they were differ from other places. Israel had annexed large space, including East Jerusalem, as was known under the Jordanian government, and also other parts of the West Bank, an area of 70 square kilometers to become East Jerusalem, and Israel declared that this is part of Israel proper. And in this area, the applicable law and the applicable administration since June 28, 1967 is the Israeli administration and Israeli domestic law, not the international law and not the laws of war. As we know, Israel made also large confiscations of land in East Jerusalem. More than 1/3 of East Jerusalem was directly confiscated in 1968 and 1971 and in the 1980s in order to build the Israeli settlements in East Jerusalem and move Israeli population to East Jerusalem that inhabit more than 1/3 of the lands in East Jerusalem, as we know today. Another significant legislation that and actions that Israel made immediately after the war in 1967 in this regard, that it made special legislation stating that if there is a property in East Jerusalem which pre-owned by Israelis before 1948, so the Israelis are fully entitled to claim back their property and even collect it back. In the same legislation also, Palestinians who were residents of East Jerusalem, who became now residents of the State of Israel, according to the same law, they were denied of their right to claim back their property in Israel proper and or even in West Jerusalem. Because of that, the residents of Sheikh Jarrah, the 28 families, although they are Palestinian refugees, that their property in Israel proper still standing, they could not, and they became now Israeli residents, they could not and they cannot claim back their property in Israel proper. This is the reason Hammad family, they cannot return to their home in Haifa, and the Kurd family cannot return also to Haifa, and Sabah family and other families cannot return to Jaffa district, or even and the Jani and the Hudi family and Husseini family, they cannot return back to their property in West Jerusalem. According to this legislation and under the clauses of this legislation, for some reason that also we do not have full details about this, because this was done without the knowledge of the Palestinian families. In 1971, two Israeli committees claimed that they own the land where the project of Karm Jaouni was constructed, and they asked the Israeli land registrar to register them as owners of this land. And he did accordingly. And all these actions were made without giving even a small or a minimum notice to the Palestinian residents living in these homes. They just woke up one day in 1974, 1975 to find themselves under the claim of two Israeli organizations, Jewish organizations, asking them to evict their homes on the ground that the land originally is owned by Israeli organizations. And since then, since 1974, the 28 families living in Sheikh Jarrah and Karm Jaouni project, they were subject to more than 68 legal proceedings in this regard. They were subject to more than thousands of court hearings, and all of these hearings and proceedings were done in the Israeli court under the Israeli law, denied their right to claim even that this law is illegal or unproportional because it's contracted to international law, and it denies them their basic right and for equality, because they cannot claim back even their property other place. And also in the same time, the court also even denied them the basic argument that can a party in a civil litigation bring to court that my presence in my house in Sheikh Jarrah is legal because a legitimate government had granted me this right, which is the Jordanian government. The maximum that the Israeli courts could declare then in the 1979 that the entrance of the families to the homes was legitimate back in the 1950s, but their remaining in the homes is not legitimate because the original ownership belongs to Jewish organizations that the Israeli law stated that they have the full right to claim back their property despite the fact that this property was transferred to a third party. So under all these circumstances, and I'm just trying to make the highlights of the arguments and the highlights of the facts, where we are standing, the Palestinian families have to face this mechanism and this institution of eviction and actually I would say displacement of population from their homes because we have a very discriminatory law, and we have a law that specially was designated in order to grant one party more rights than the other party, and continue to deny the Palestinian residents from their property rights, whether they were historic property rights in Israel proper or current property rights in East Jerusalem. And under this situation, they found themselves forced to continue to litigate in different proceedings and multiple proceedings in Israeli courts in the 1970s, in the 1980s, and suddenly in the 1982, in 1982, there were proceedings against 17 families. They were represented by Israeli lawyer at that time, that under these circumstances, he found himself, they found themselves, the residents engaged in some sort of settlement that then the Israeli lawyer agreed to declare to the court that the ownership of the land belongs, the historic ownership of the land belongs to these Israeli organizations. Because of that, after that, it was easy for the Israeli court to evict 3 families from their homes. We are speaking about core families now. We are speaking about expanded families and extended families. More than 65 people were evicted from their homes. Settler families entered to these homes in Sheikh Jarrah since 2008, and they live in these homes. And you heard from Reem, her testimony about harassments and all the situation when you live in a neighborhood and suddenly your neighborhood become also partially popularized by hostile forces and hostile families, because these families, the settler families, they moved to the neighborhood with arms and with guards and with 24 hours so-called security in order to secure their presence in the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah. And you heard the testimonies of Reem in this regard. And since then, when I got engaged in the case of Sheikh Jarrah 14 years ago, I, together with my colleague Saleh Abu Hussein, who started the representation of the families 25 years ago in 1994, we insisted to try to go back to the roots of the case. So we did 2 shifts in the court, although we still very limited in our ability, we know, and in the litigation under the domestic law to do. But we started raising the original property rights and the original ownership of this land. So we conducted research for years, started back in the Ottoman archive in Ankara, many times visiting the Ottoman archive in Istanbul. We found some of the original deeds for the land of this land in Sheikh Jarrah, and we became to be convinced that even the original ownership or the claim by the Jewish committees for original ownership of this land is mistaken, and this site does not originally belong to these organizations. Maybe they had historic ownership in other places in Sheikh Jarrah, but not in this land. We brought a case, proactive case, to the Israeli court in 2012 in order to, with our new evidence that we brought. Unfortunately, the Israeli court dismissed the case. They did not allow us to proceed on the ground that there is a limitation of statute of limitation, because the ownership is registered under the name of the committee since 1972 in Israel, and we only brought the case in 2012. So we are stopped from bringing and continuing in the proceedings, although we argued that the evidence was collected just in the same year, in 2011, 2012. And also the residents of Sheikh Jarrah, many of them, they did not know about the claims of the Israeli ownership back in the 70s and could not get the proof. The other angle also we tried, and we continue in this regard, and to strengthen with the new evidence every time and every year and every month, and especially in the last year, is the claim that the current residents of Sheikh Jarrah, not just their entrance to the houses was legitimate, their remaining in the houses is legitimate, and the Israeli authorities have to recognize their full ownership in their homes because they were granted this ownership by an obligation which was made by the Jordanian government. Although there is a lack of registration because the ownership was not registered during the Jordanian period under the name of the residents, because I don't have enough time to explain that, but the proceedings of registration of land is a general lack in East Jerusalem. More than 92% of the lands of East Jerusalem are not registered in the proper deeds at the land registrar office. And this is the situation also of this community in Sheikh Jarrah. So the lack of registration, according to our argument, does not weaken the argument and the full right of ownership that these families are entitled to gain and to continue to have in their homes in East Jerusalem. Unfortunately, also in this regard, the Israeli court denied our and rejected our argument. But this argument is strongly now was presented in the hearings in the High Court in August and May this year in the case of the four families. We also submitted experts' opinion in this regard. We also were able to receive from the Jordanian authorities on April this year a full authorized copy of 14 agreements belong to 14 families that were signed in 1959, and we submitted this to court. And we hope that in the ruling that the High Court has to give in the case of the four families, they will give full attention and they will accept this argument, because it is the right of these 28 families to be recognized as owners of the houses in Sheikh Jarrah. I don't want to go further here and to speak about other places in Sheikh Jarrah, because Karmit Jaouni just in the center, but Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood is a large neighborhood in East Jerusalem, and other sites in Sheikh Jarrah also under huge settlement activities in the last few years. Kubbaniyat Harun, the next neighborhood to Karmet Jaouni, and the Shepherd's Hotel, which used to be the house of Mufti Amin al-Husseini, also was confiscated, and new Israeli settlement was constructed there 2 years ago, and now it's inhabited by hundreds of Israeli settlers. So this is the situation so far. I hope that I succeeded to summarize and clarify some of the issues in this regard. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ershied. And this was a very illuminating talk. As you were speaking, I was thinking actually of the limitations of operating under a colonial legal system, which is already basically prejudiced in relation to the indigenous population and its rights. And in this case, of course, we know that prior to the late 1870s, the Zionist movement did not own a single inch in Palestine. And now they're coming and talking about ownership claims here and there. Of course, these are not individual families that are genuinely dealing with these claims. It's a settler colonial movement that has made it explicit that it wants and it has an objective, which is to turn Palestinian lands and Palestinian inhabited areas into Jewish areas. And I think that's really the context behind this. We can easily get lost in the legal arguments in these courts, but we must be also very cognizant of the politics behind this. And I think you've shared with our audience some of these politics, while at the same time giving us access to some of the legal nuance. Now we have some questions for you, Dr. Ershied, but also for Dr. Farra and for Reem as well. So let's start with the question for Reem, which was a question about schooling in Jerusalem. The question was, can you please speak about the condition and quality of schools in Jerusalem? Despite the immense pressure and oppression that Israel imposes on the Palestinians of Jerusalem, are Palestinian youth able to excel in their education? Dr. Reem, are you?
Yes. Reem, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a teacher.
Sorry.
Okay. So the schools here in Jerusalem are divided into three parts. We have the municipality schools that are, that belong to the Israeli government, and then we have the Awqaf schools that are run by, also the Palestinian Ministry of Education, and then we have private schools. So what I can say is that the Palestinian, the schools in Jerusalem that are with the Palestinian Ministry of Education lack a lot of things. They lack a lot of resources. They lack a lot of even most of the buildings of the schools are rented houses, old houses that have been rented by the Awqaf and then given to the ministry so that they can establish schools in them. So their conditions are really poor. The resources, they lack a lot of resources, and everything is actually not so good for them. Private schools are private schools, like any other schools in the world. So that's the situation here. And as for the curriculum, the Palestinian curriculum is the curriculum that's taught in all schools, but then in the municipality schools, they edit and they change the curriculum. Say if there's a lesson about Yafa or about anything that is of Palestinian distinct, they change it and they don't allow the teachers to, to let the students know what's, what really is the Palestinian case. They edit and they cancel a lot of the lessons within the curriculum itself, so that the students don't get the knowledge that they're supposed to get about their country and about Palestine.
Excellent, excellent. We have also a question for Dr. Farra. Dr. Farra, can you speak about the suicide rates in Gaza? People and children feel hopeless. That was a question for you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear.
Can you hear me? Thank you for this question. This is part of the despair in the society, and we don't have a proper rates, but every day we hear about 2-3 cases that have been ended their lives, mainly children and young adults. So it is common, and it is due to feeling of despair and lack of hope and lack of horizon, and very critical situation they are living in under the siege and the occupation and the hardships of life.
Yeah, it's a very difficult subject indeed, and I think Dr. Farra, as you've emphasized throughout your talk, all of this does not need to happen, and all of this is a part and parcel of a broader policy, isn't it?
For sure, and it is all under the pretense of Israel security, which is not the truth. The truth that this is colonial apartheid occupation, and they are trying to kill, to demolish us and kill us slowly. I call it a new version of genocide, a new way of genocide. We are not killed directly. They are trying to deprive us of normal means for life to end up with us. And this is the same strategy like ethnic cleansing and other inventions the occupier invent to suppress or suppress the occupied. What's happening in Gaza is a new version of genocide, I call it.
Yeah. And we have a question from a wonderful friend of mine, Maya Tabit, who also happens to be the associate editor of the Journal of Palestine Studies. There's a question for Sami, for Dr. Sami Ershied. You said that the Jordanians had built the housing units in an area where there were no buildings. But later you said that Israel is claiming that the buildings occupied currently in Sherzara were owned prior to 1948 by Jewish people / Israelis. Can you please clarify? Dr. Ershied.
Yes, sorry. When this project, okay, in order to clarify, let's go back as also you mentioned, maybe it's also to repeat for the audience, and again, the case of Sheikh Jarrah, we are dealing with it in domestic legal tools, while it is very significant political conflict and question. As I mentioned, it's not just the two parties engaged now in court are the main parties. The main parties are absent. The international community that allowed the residents of Sheikh Jarrah to enter to these homes, the Jordanian government that also constructed the homes, the United Nations by UNRWA that also got the full consideration from the families for these homes are absent. And again, as you mentioned, yes, it's not a legal conflict and the legal issue. It's an issue of displacement of Palestinian population, moving them out of their homes in order to bring Israeli settlers to live in this neighborhood. It's the issue of controlling Jerusalem, and also it's the continuous issue of denying Palestinian refugees from their right, not just to return, even to claim their basic right for housing in the subsidiary places that they gained. But in order to clarify, if we go back to 1948, this area of Karm al-Jaouni was empty land. It was not, there were no homes there. After 1948, when when Jerusalem was divided, Sheikh Jarrah, including Karm al-Jaouni, became to be under the Jordanian custody according to the agreement between the Jordanians and the Israelis for ceasefire in 1949. And we know that Jordan had made the declaration and resolutions in 1951 to annex also, to put full power and to apply full administration on East Jerusalem and the West Bank, the other parts of West Bank. Accordingly, the Jordanian government, since it was not clear that there was private ownership on this land, the Jordanian government declared that it is a public land. It belongs to the government. And also then we found that there was even a dispute among the Jordanian different arms with whether it was a public land or a land maybe which was had no owner, so it was to be under the administration of the custodian of enemy lands, the Jordanian custodian of enemy lands. But in both cases, it was a public land administered and in the position of the government itself. Accordingly, the government entered to an agreement with the UNRWA in order to construct this project for housing for Palestinian refugees. And according to the agreement, we found that even the UNRWA paid to the Jordanian government full consideration for the land and for the construction of the houses. Accordingly, also the Minister of Housing, the Jordanian Minister of Housing, signed clear agreement with Palestinian families, single agreements with every family, that there he made clear obligation that after 3 years of starting living in the house, each family will get a full ownership over the house and the plot of land that belongs to the house. I hope this clarifies.
Yeah, and I think one other angle that maybe I want to ask you about myself, Dr. Ershied, as we know of some cases like the one that was exposed by the former Israeli Attorney General Michael Ben Yair, that these settler groups, what they come and do is manipulate even some of the old deeds that did belong to some Jewish families in the area, and they try then to engage in money extortion and other activities that are very questionable as part of this settler colonial push as well. Can you share with us some of the insights on that, actually? Because this is obviously, again, like these are centralized groups that explicitly state that their aim in life, not just in this case, in today or tomorrow, in their entire aim in life is to Judaize Jerusalem. Yeah, that is their. Can you tell us about it? And they seem to be using rabbinical courts that are run by their friends, basically, to execute this agenda. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, in the case of Sheikh Jarrah and the case you mentioned of Michael Ben Yair, there are two examples, great examples to emphasize what we are facing and how organized is this policy and these actions are made. For example, in the case of Karm al-Jaouni that I mentioned, our counterparty in the Israeli courts is a subsidiary company, is a company registered in Israel, but it is owned by an American company that is registered in Delaware in the United States as a partnership, limited partnership, and there they enjoy a full secrecy that we do not know who are the shareholders of the company. And the American company is using Israeli domestic law, which is contrary to international law, in order to evict Palestinian families on the basis that there is a historic claim that the historic ownership belongs to two Jewish organizations that shifted their rights to this American company, also with this very special decision that was made by the biblical court, the rabbinical court in Israel, to allow this historic Jewish trust to sell their right to American company. And also, as I mentioned, we found during our research in Ankara and in Istanbul that this claim has no grounds, because we do have now the proof and the real deeds of the historic transactions and the historic description of the lands in Sheikh Jarrah. And we have full evidence to bring to court to prove that even the historic ownership is not true. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, because of technical decision was made by Israeli court according to the domestic law, our case was dismissed. They did not allow us to bring the proceedings in court and to prove who is the right owner. So this is one of the difficulties also we face in these cases, that again, bringing us to the smallest corner of civil proceedings under very designated laws, especially for these cases, makes our space very narrow, even to act as lawyers and to prove what is the truth and what is just to be done. The example of Michael Ben Yair is also another example, because Jewish families who lost property in East Jerusalem during the war in 1948, and they moved to East Jerusalem or other places, there is evidence that they were compensated by the Israeli government with a property that historically belonged to Palestinians. Michael Ben Yair family, for example, that moved from Sheikh Jarrah area to West Jerusalem, they were given a house in West Jerusalem and also a store in Jaffa Road in the city center of Jerusalem as a compensation for their property. After 1967, when the family of Ben Yair felt that it is immoral to claim back their property in Sheikh Jarrah because they already were compensated, they found that their property was given by the Israeli authorities to a settler group, a settler company registered somewhere in the Virgin Islands or in the Cayman Islands, and they collect rent from the Palestinian residents of the house. Even they were rude enough in order to bring eviction proceedings against the Palestinian family without the knowledge of the historic owner of the property. So these are only two examples of many cases. We know that the cases of evicting Palestinians from their homes in East Jerusalem by individuals or companies is not really a private proceedings and private projects in East Jerusalem. This is part of a very systematic policy of settlement and displacement of population, of Palestinian population from their homes in East Jerusalem.
Well, Dr. Sami, thank you. We have a question for Dr. Muna. How can people abroad help with the everyday lives of the people in Gaza? And do you want to switch on your video, Dr. Muna, if it works?
First, I would say it very, very strongly. Of course, we need many things. We are proud of many things. We are not a case of charity. Solidarity is very important to understand us, to spread our voices, to spread our suffering here in Gaza under this apartheid occupation. Of course, I'm not being here just giving you slogans or something, but of course there is practical need. And thank you for asking. I'm sure people want to help with practically. So first thing, to spread our word and to increase the advocacy and awareness about what's happening in Palestine under siege and occupation in Gaza and Palestine. Second, practical. And I have mentioned that in my talk as MECA director, that at the moment we are running big project for at least 1 year. It will be about psychological support of the children who suffered with the latest trauma and the accumulative trauma. Trauma here, one on top of another, because of the Israeli assaults, and trauma because of the hardship of lives, and it is continuous, ongoing. But the most difficult is the post-traumatic trauma after the attacks. We need great help in that. This is number one. Number two, nutrition project. We are at the moment in the process of running big project to help with the nutrition of the children, and cooperation with a very well-known organization in Gaza that deals with this matter, the children nutrition, which is not. It is very well-known one, specialized in this, and we have the middle camp area in coordination with that organization, because other NGOs, international NGOs, has covered other areas. We need great help in that as well. Kindergartens, the children in the kindergartens, we have a special program to feed that, to give children meals inside the kindergartens. And I would like to share with you quickly about my latest visit to one of the kindergartens in Beit Hanun village. I don't like to break your heart, but to show the reality. I have seen children who are literally hungry. Two kids were fighting over a sandwich of dukka and bread. I don't know if you know what is dukka. This is something in Gaza similar to oregano. So the two kids were fighting over this piece of bread, and we have intervention in those kindergartens to try to give cooked meals for the children, and this became one of our programs, and I hope that it will continue, and that we can continue give balanced meals for the children. Of course, it is not just delivering the meals. These children are subjected to medical checkup and investigations before and after, to make sure that our intervention has helped in improving the children's and their families' health. And we focus on the families of those children. So our aid, because some organizations help with relief aid like food. So our aid is focused to the families of those children. So we are taking the child and the family at one package. Many things we need, but this is the things I'm thinking at now. Of course, we need playgrounds for our kids, because the playgrounds, and we started this already. There's a chain of playgrounds we are in the process of implementing. We founded two for girls, sport for girls and sports for kids. And I personally see this as a part of psychological support, because when the children are deprived of in their very crowded homes and alleys in the refugee camps and villages, when there is nice place, small place in the open air with girls, mainly the girls and the boys, because we have two shifts, can enjoy sports, riding bikes, playing basketball. I could see it. It is not a leisure place. It is need and necessity for the general health of our children. We are trying. This is the main things, and I put it in priorities as well. Everything is needed in Gaza. Medicine. Mecca, every year we have like 2 or 3 loads of medication. Everything is needed. The platform is yours, and everyone is most welcome. But I repeat it that we need advocacy, awareness, and to the world to know that we don't have the feeling of victims. We are not victims. We are on the path of freedom, and we'll continue.
We have a question for you also on that note, Dr. Muna, from Dr. Justine McCabe. Are international mental health workers allowed into Gaza at all?
International
Are international mental health workers allowed into Gaza at all?
Yeah, they are allowed if they were invited by a mental health program like Gaza Community Mental Health Program, which is a great partner, and I can facilitate that. Of course, they can apply. Allowed or not allowed, we don't know, because this has to do with the people at areas checkpoint, but it is worth it trying because this is very needed. It is needed to train staff, to share experience, and to take part in children's support, children of the war, we call them. So please come back to me on my email, and I can not help, promise to facilitate that, but I'm not allowed myself to leave Gaza. I am forbidden from leaving Gaza through Israel.
Yeah, and I know that there are several networks out there, like the UK Palestine Mental Health Network and other networks that also hold events like Cafe Palestine to educate the mental health community in the UK and the USA and other countries about the realities that are going on. And sometimes this can lead to advocacy within that sector that goes beyond, as well as practical interventions of the sort that.
Yeah, but I mean, coming in person to Gaza is very important for many levels because we feel that we are not forgotten, we are not alone. And these seminars are very, very important with this Zoom and webinar. But still, if somebody are interested to come to Gaza, he can get in touch with Gaza Community Mental Health Program or through me, and I can guide him where to go.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now we have a question for Dr. Sami. What is your prognosis? By the way, we don't have much time left. So Dr. Sami, you have 1 minute for this. What is your prognosis for the struggle of Sherzara families? Are you hopeful that they will be able to remain in their homes? How long do you think these proceedings will take to be resolved?
Okay.
What do you expect of the future?
We cannot know what is the future exactly, but we know from our experience that the community of Sherzara is resisting and fighting for their presence in their homes in the last 50 years. Although 3 families had fully evicted from their homes in 2008 and 2009, and 1 family had forced to evict half of their home and to share it with settlers since then. The proceedings, as I mentioned, under the Israeli law, do not guarantee the continuation of the presence of the residents of Sherzara in their homes, unless this issue will be resolved politically, and it has to be resolved politically because at the beginning of the day, it is a political question. I hope the involvement of the international community and the engagement of the Jordanian government with United Nations and UNRWA is very essential to do this in order to ensure their presence and their continuation in their homes. From our side, as lawyers, we did and we continue to do all what we can in Israeli courts, although many days we are very pessimistic, but some days we are optimistic, because still, even with this very narrow corner where we live there, we still have and believe we have strong arguments in order to convince that the only just resolution is to keep the Palestinian families in their homes.
Well, thank you very much for your resolute activism and advocacy, Dr. Sami Ershied. And thank you to Reem for staying steadfast and strong in the face of this attempt to evict her and their family and the other families of Sherzara. And thank you to Dr. Muna Al-Farra, and our deepest condolences to you on the tragic passing away of your nephew, who I personally knew, actually, and I'm very deeply moved by what took place. But also thank you for inspiring us all these years through your resolute work in Gaza. And to all the panelists, I think you brought to us Palestine closer. I mean, and part of the reality of colonialism is that there's an attempt to keep Palestine distant from people's minds, but to also prevent us from visiting it, of course, physically, to know what is going on. Of course, as Palestinians, we can't even move back to our homes and lands there. But there's an attempt to detach Palestinians as well as those in solidarity from across the world from the realities there. What you did today was to bring those realities closer to us through your personal testimonies. This was not about sloganeering or about abstract reflection. You spoke about everyday life of the Palestinian people in each of the zones that you represent. And I'm very grateful. I personally learned so much from your testimonies. And I'm sure that other members of the audience felt the same way. So we salute you, we thank you, and I wish you and the rest of the audience a wonderful remainder to the day. Now, of course, we do have a panel coming up that is very exciting, that might add some further reflections. Palestinian cause is so filled with stories, and we can spend days and days talking about it. But I'm very excited about our next panel, and I'm sure Muhammad is going to share with us some information about it.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Takriti. We appreciate it. Just a quick, before I pass it along to Dr. Eid Mustafa, just a reminder to our audience. So we're about to have basically a lunch break. So we will be starting our second and last panel at 2:00 p.m. Eastern US time, which is about an hour and a half away from now. So we will end the meeting after we're done here. But you can please join back at around 2:00 p.m. And we will be having Ali Abu Ni'ma, Dalal Yassin, and the Reverend Graylin Hagler. So it will be a great discussion on that panel too. So please join us. And I will now pass it along to Dr. Eid.
All right. Thank you, Muhammad. Dr. Farra, Reem, and Dr. Sami Ershied, thank you so very much for sharing your on-the-ground experience with us and with our audience. And thank you, Abid, for excellent handling of this panel. You know, I find these facts to be heartbreaking, depressing, and very infuriating. I think the deafening silence of the powers to be that know what's going on and continue to stay silent and probably complicit is a stain on the conscience of the world. And with that, and I know it's emotional, but I wish things will get better. We feel your pain. We're with you as many peace-loving and justice-loving people around the world. Thank you again, and we'll meet this afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.